Hola, I'm Claudia Romo Edelman.
And I'm Cynthia Kleinbaum-Milner.
And this is a podcast, A La Latina.
The playbook to succeed, being your authentic self.
In this episode, the incredible Rita Ferro, president of Disney Global Advertising.
And in this episode, you will get 3 main takeaways.
Number 1, negotiation isn't an annual meeting. It's an ongoing discussion where you demonstrate the results that you have delivered, what you want to achieve still, and reiterate your commitment to your company.
Number 2, marketing and advertising are a perfect fit for Hispanics. It is a good blend between creative and business. It's fun, interesting, and you can make a lot of money.
And number 3, make sure to use your internship in college to learn what you like and what you don't like so that you can make the right decision when joining the job market.
This and more
in this episode, A La Latina. Cynthia, tell me more about Money Lion. What is your favorite product?
The product that I loved the most first was our credit builder loan. When I moved to the US, I realized that a good credit score impacts so many aspects of our life. If you have a high credit score, you can get lower interest rates on loans and credit cards, better insurance rates, and better chances of getting a loan. Can you imagine that more than half of our members raise their credit score by up to 27 points in 60 days?
Wow. Okay, so I'm learning something new here, and I should be checking on my credit score myself.
Everybody should, and it's super easy. So for anyone out there needing to improve their credit score or even know your credit score, come to Money Lion.
That's amazing. How do you access the credit builder loan?
2 ways. Either go to moneylion.com/membership or download the Money Lion app.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm
Let's do
in.
it.
Today, an incredible guest, Rita Ferro, president of Disney Global Advertising.
Rita sits on the board of the Hispanic Scholarship Fund, the Mobile Marketing Association, the Ad Council, and the V Foundation for Cancer Research.
Rita is the first Latinx woman and third woman in 35 years to receive the prestigious Frank Stanton Award for Excellence in Communication.
She has been named to Variety's Power of Women New York Impact List. She was recognized by the Hollywood Reporter's Women in Entertainment Power 100, in addition to being featured on Advertising Age's Women to Watch Power List, which celebrates the most powerful women in advertising.
For 8 consecutive years, Rita has been named one of the most powerful and influential Latinos by the Imagen Foundation and was inducted into its Hall of Fame in 2019, honoring individuals in the entertainment industry who have dedicated themselves to excelling in their profession. Wow, Rita, you are an incredible trailblazer, honestly, one of our most admired Latinas forever. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you guys both for having me here. It's such a pleasure.
It's incredible. Like after reading and seeing your bio here to our guest, we all want to know, how did it happen? How is it that you are who you are today? What brought you to be you?
I was very lucky to be born into an incredible Cuban-American family, first generation, born and raised in Miami. I'm a girl from the 305, and I'm still a girl from the 305. And I'm the oldest of 4 kids. So I had siblings who kept me honest and busy and always energized by, being part of, my tribe, my group. And I think that has served me really well in business because I started my career in advertising. I don't know that I knew where I wanted to go, but I found my passion in college and started in a business that, has fulfilled me on both the creative side and the business side. And, I'm a very big fan of, if you do what you love every single day, it's not work. And I've been lucky to get to do that for almost 27 years at the Walt Disney Company, and that I get to work at a place where I love what I do so much every day. It doesn't feel like work. I work on amazing characters and franchises. I started my career in ESPN, and I worked in Latin America, and then I came back to our kids and family business in the US, and eventually took over the advertising business and recently the global advertising business. So
Which is incredible.
It's fun.
Cool.
But you know what? It's fun, and I get to go back to what I call home, which is the international business, which I love. I was in France and Germany last week. I'll be heading to Argentina in 2 weeks. I was in India a month ago. It's so exciting. It's so exciting because it's a business that's in transformation, and so I'm constantly learning, which is really important. I feel like I'm always invested in what's new, what's happening, the transformation happening in our business, understanding technology, understanding data, and how that's going to influence how we work with brands.
So before we go, I feel like there's so much to talk about your work and your job and the trends that you see. But I want to understand the circumstances in which you grew up. Because you said that you found your passion in college, and then you were probably one of the luckiest people I've met in the professional context where you found your passion right away.
I don't know that I found it right away.
No.
If you know me, you would know that I graduated 5.5. It took me 5.5 years to graduate from my undergraduate degree.
So let's talk about
I
that.
was a disaster at school because I tried everything. My best friend and I were super social, super, we like to go out and be part of every club, every meeting, but we were not great students.
Okay.
So I was not a great student in my undergraduate. I did graduate with, honors in my graduate degree many years later. But in my undergraduate degree, it took me 5.5 years to find my calling. I probably went through every major available. And at the end, she and I said, okay, well, you're going to do fashion and I'm going to do advertising and we'll figure out what we like and we'll both switch. And she found her passion and she has a very successful career in fashion. And I found my passion in advertising.
Okay.
Whenever we see her mom lives in Puerto Rico, and whenever she comes and she sees us together, she's like, if I would have seen the two of you today, and 20 years ago you would have told me to place a bet on that this would be what the two of you are, I would have been broke, right? Because we were a disaster. And yet we both found our, what we loved, and when you find what you love, it becomes easy. It becomes easy. And I'm not saying you're going to find what you love maybe in the first job or in your first, but I think, when you find that spark that creates that
flow.
excitement in you. And by the way, it's not only what you study, because if you don't land in the right place, right? So you have to try a bunch of different things. Internships are important. I tell my daughter who's she's about to finish her freshman year in Clemson, you want to do internships, not so much for what you love, make sure you know what you don't love, right? So you don't waste time doing that.
So it was finding your passion, but also probably the values that you had played a role in sort of directing you, guiding you, and putting you, what were those, and were they coming from your family? Is there anything that you want to share on that? Because I think that we have a lot to say thank you for our generations above.
Yeah.
And also the role that we have to be conscious about, the role that we play as mothers in giving it back to our kids.
Absolutely. I mean, listen, I grew up in a family that was very hardworking. My dad had his own business, a food company with my grandfather that they started in Cuba. And when they came here, they restarted it, Conchita Foods. It's a Spanish vegetables and fruits company, canned fruits company. My brothers run it today. And they worked 7 days a week, probably 12 hours a day. So hard work was always something that I knew was going to be part of who I was, because it's what I grew up in. I didn't know anything else. My dad used to always say, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Spend more time listening than talking. Unbelievably valuable, right? In our business, where people love to, always be talking, to listen to what's going on.
Yeah.
It was always, a thing of the people around you. My dad used to say, our team at the office is an extension of our family. My team is an extension of me, right? I hire the best people and I let them do what they want, because I saw that in my house, right? My dad's family was, everybody who worked in the company was part of who we were. We went to all the, they were part of everything we did. And so that was really, really important. And I remember when I started business, my dad, they were all small business owners. I was the first one to go into the corporate world. And he used to tell me, whenever you get invited into a meeting, you have to contribute. So make sure you say something in that room so people know why they invited you and why you're there, and make sure that you have an opinion. So be prepared when you walk in, and make sure that you contribute something in that meeting to make sure that they know who you are and that you deserve a seat at that table every single time. And that was really important for me, right? Because I didn't know. I hadn't seen executives in my house. So, everybody I knew was a small business owner, right? All of my aunts and my uncles, everybody had their own business. That was kind of the world I grew up in. And so that was really helpful. It was really helpful to get that feedback, and also to know the importance of, your group is really important to who you are.
I haven't said this before in any of the episodes, but I've thought about it. Almost every one of our guests has said that one of their keys to success has been working hard. You know, like, I don't know why sometimes Hispanics, we don't have the reputation that we're really hardworking, you know, like the Mexican siesta. We are such hard workers.
Oh my God, I think Latinos work
like
harder
so
than...
hard. And at some point in my career, I can't remember in which job, I was applying for a job and I got an interview, and they had what they considered a trick question. The person would ask you, what would you define yourself more, as smarter than the average or harder working than the average? And they thought it was a trick question, but to me, I was like, obviously harder working. But a lot of people answer smarter than the average. And to them, that was the sign. Anybody that answers smarter than the average is like out the door.
Oh,
exactly.
for sure.
Exactly. Hard working.
I'd rather have somebody who works really hard and who's dedicated. I mean, nothing we do, I mean, we're not brain surgeons, so,
Yeah.
right? We could teach great people anything, but you have to be a great person
Totally.
and work hard and be there. No one cheats a system, right?
Yeah.
You only get ahead when you work hard, you put in the time, and you make it so that it's really, you're held accountable for what you contribute.
Let's assume that we're all hard workers. But there's a piece that I've heard again and again from different guests on how listening to your calling and what you're good at, sometimes we shut it down because we don't think it is relevant or is going to be bringing us a prosperous career. And I heard a little bit of social, party, you call it disaster, but for me, it's listening more to, I can picture you in more like gathering and leading people towards, you know, like an event or doing more of that piece. And I don't know how much you recognize that in advertising, but there's a piece there that is like social listening and then, you know, like bringing people together
For
to
sure.
share an idea. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and it's funny because I'm an introvert. I say
You
this all the
are.
time. I'm a very big an introvert. But when I'm on, right? And so this is part of the job. And so I love what I do and I love that part of the job, but I am a complete introvert in my social life. You know, my husband, I will get home on Friday and he's like, what are we doing? And I go, nothing today, right? Because you need to recharge. It's how you recharge, I think. But it's really important, and it's interesting you say that because my daughter is much more of an extrovert like my husband than I am. And, you know, we were going through this whole, she's a freshman, she's finishing her freshman year, she has to declare a major. And so, you know, of course, I want her to study finance or economics. You know, I want her to study a thing that you could take and do anything with. And she's like, but I love what you do. And I said, I know you love what I do and the perception of what I do. And so she's like, so I want to do marketing. I said, that's great. And you could do whatever you want to do. But I want you to pick something that you love because you love it, not because you think I love what I do and I'm super happy at it because you, and by the way, she would be an extraordinary marketer because she's fun and creative and she, you know, she's like the one that brings people together too. Like a lot of similarities of when I was younger, I see in her. But, you know, you want someone to be able to find what, like I say, you could do every single day that doesn't feel like a job because you just love it so much. And it's a lot of, I think this whole perception of like, it was so hard to figure out how to get ahead in your career and how do you network and, you know, the in the rooms, the people who understood the numbers really well, the people who went to the right schools always seemed to have an edge. And so for me, for her, it's always, I want you to be better prepared. I want you to have more opportunity. But you know, as my husband reminded me when she left, and I was like, you know what, Dati, study exactly what you want to study. You want to do marketing? Great. Sports management? Great. So now she's going to do marketing with a minor in sports management. But, you know, he's like, you say, you know, you have to be prepared. He's like, but you had a communications degree with a minor in creative writing. And look where you are, right? Like, it doesn't matter what you study. It matters what you do with it afterwards. And that is really important. And I've always been very careful with her because I have the job that I have, that I never wanted to put a lot of pressure on her. I was always around. So wherever I was, I always came back on the weekends. I always brought her to every event I could bring her to. So she had a lot. She, you know, while I missed a lot, she got a lot because of the job I had. She was able to attend a lot of things that, you know, she has the cool mom in her mind.
That's probably why she wants your job, because she doesn't see what your job actually is.
Exactly. She doesn't see the hard work of it all. But it was, you know, it's something that she always knew she was my priority. But she always saw that I worked really hard and long hours and I traveled a lot. And she knows it's not easy, right? She's been through the ups and the downs of, like, you know, friends of mine losing their job or the industry changing and what does that mean? And we moved when she was 5 from Miami to New York. So she grew up here, right? And so very important that she also understood the importance of like family and your cousins and what does that mean in terms of your network first and foremost. Yes, you have friends, but your cousins are your first friends, and your cousins are your nucleus, if you will. And so we spend a lot of time when she was growing up talking about that. And now it's like, I just want her to do what she loves. And the beauty is, she has many more advantages our kids do than we had.
Right.
Which is amazing.
Exactly. And that's part of what we want to do in this podcast, is to provide the role models, the playbooks, and then the network so that our Latinas can do it in half the time with half the bruises. I want to go back to one point. So you're the highest ranked and the most important Latina in your company, Walt Disney. You are probably the most important Latina in advertising. How did you, like if you could look back, you've been in the company for 22 years, like from student that was like a disaster student to a master degree or something, and today. Tell us a bit more about your career, getting into corporate.
I don't know that I would say that I had a roadmap, because I don't think that when I started almost July 7th of 97, so imagine it's almost 27 years. I don't think that I started and I thought, one day I'm going to run advertising in this company. I started at ESPN. I knew nothing about sports, but I knew the Latin America business. And the reason I got into ESPN, by the way, was because I was having lunch with 2 friends who were going to interview for the head of sales for ESPN job. And so after lunch, they're like, hey, we're going to drive by the airport at the Admirals Club. Imagine how long ago that was. I was interviewing. So my 2 guy friends come and he's like, okay, you're next. And I'm like, oh. And then I'm like, you know what the hell? I'm going to go in. Because at that time I worked at MTV. And I worked in sales on the fashion and sneaker side. And so all of our pitches were against ESPN. So I felt like I knew the business, but I didn't really know sports at all. I knew it as a fan, but not to the level I know it today. He loved that I spoke Spanish. The other 2 guys, they said they spoke Spanish. They didn't really speak Spanish. I could speak it and write it. And I worked in a business where, I spoke it all the time. And it was such an advantage, by the way. I mean, it's one of the things, my daughter speaks fluent Spanish today, and it's really important that and I tell her all the time that you have that, because it is a differentiator in the market today with so few people who speak multiple languages. But I remember I came out of the interview and, John McDonald, the gentleman at the time, says, sweetie, you're not going to get the job. You're a girl. And I'm like, what? I don't know that I wanted the job, but I took the job after that. I'll tell you that. They hired me, and I immediately moved to New York.
So your 2 friends were like, oh, thank you for the ride?
Like, literally, I was with them in the car. That's why I went. If not, I would have gone back. So talk about being at the right place at the right time. But part of it was, what do you mean I'm not going to get the job and I'm a girl, right? I grew up with 2 brothers. I was going to get the job. And I did get the job. And it was great. And immediately after I got the job, I made a tremendous impact right away, because the guy that had the job before lived in New York, didn't live in Miami, didn't know the market. So I was able to make an impression right away and then travel to Latin America and speak the language. The guy who was there before was Cuban American, but like 3rd generation, didn't really speak Spanish. And so like the Latin team was like, we love her because we can communicate and she understands us. And so that was a tremendous advantage. And over time, I eventually, Disney was running out, converting to an advertising business. Eventually, my boss was looking for a head of sales at the time, saw me at a restaurant and said, I heard you run advertising at ESPN. Do you have someone you can recommend? I said, I'll call you this afternoon with some names. And I called my boss and I'm like, why are they hiring a team? We have a team. We're the same company. And it was the first time that they brought ESPN and Disney together internationally to be able to do that. And so I took over sales for both Disney and ESPN. And so, what's the theme? I always said yes. There was an opportunity. Oh, I want to try that. I said yes. And eventually that led to something else, right? And so eventually I got a call from the US. Hey, the girl, Diego's going to run Europe. The girl who runs the kids and family business in the US is going to be his CMO. Do you want to interview for this job? Sure. Right? And so it just became a series of people know who you are because you always say yes, and you're working on multiple projects, not only my stuff, but other stuff that wasn't necessarily what I would have touched, but eventually led to a different opportunity. And then 7 years ago, they said, we're going to start to integrate these sales organizations. And I remember my boss, my old boss from ESPN, Ed Earhart, who ran ESPN, said, they're going to come talk to you. And he said it to me at an event, and it made me so nervous that I was like, I ran upstairs. I left the event and I ran upstairs, and it made me nervous because I was like, what does that even mean? It was not even on my radar that I could eventually, run an integrated organization. And by the way, it was a much smaller organization than the one I went today. It was only around ABC and the cable networks and the kids business. And he knew he was going to retire, and he knew that business was going to get folded in too, right? And so he was very supportive. And I remember saying to him, which was a very important moment for me, and I've said it to many other executives who have been moved up in the company, because I said, well, why do they want me? I don't know anybody. Like, I ran a team, but I ran a very small business compared to my peers. And he's like, it doesn't matter that they don't know you, because they're going to want to know you when you run that business, and you're going to do an amazing job at it, because you have the skills to be able to do it like no one else does. And so that was incredible for me, because it was like, okay, you don't always have to be perfectly fit and check all the boxes, but when you work hard and you have the experience of what they're looking to do, and you've done it successfully, and I had integrated teams over and over, you can do the next job. And what made you successful doing that doesn't mean you're successful in the next job. But all those things that you put in your head, right? Why would they give me the job? I don't know anyone, right? I didn't know the big power players in the market. And he very confidently, like in 2 seconds, said, you don't need to know them. They're all going to want to know you.
It does sound like you had a lot of sponsors, like throughout your career, that you did a good job, and then your boss
a lot of them
became
were my
your
bosses.
sponsor.
Yeah,
Exactly.
a lot of them were my bosses who would say, we're going to do this. And I'm like, you're crazy. We're going to do it. And it's going to be great. And it feels like you're dangling off the ledge, but he's holding you by the back of your, shirt, so you're not going to fall, but you're like dangling, and who knows what's going to happen. By the way, when it was successful, it was 100% yours.
Yeah.
And when it didn't work, it was 100% his fault. He always took the blame for it.
I mean, that's...
And so having bosses like that who really like block and tackle for you, but also push you to test your boundaries, that's super important.
Yeah.
The job isn't about the job you have, it's about the person you work for. Right? And so I always strive to be the boss that people feel like, hey, she helped me be my better self. She helped me get a different job. She pushed me to do something else. There's someone on my team right now who's being considered for a role in the company. And I called her and I said, you have to do this. Oh, no, but I'm not going to get to work for you. No, but you'll get to work with me. That's even better, right? You don't work for me right now. You work for someone on my team. And this job is going to be a job that is my peer. Mm-hmm. You should do this job. You could do this job. She called twice over the weekend. Oh my God, I said, go to the interview. You're gonna see, you're gonna be able to understand the job, understand why you're being considered, and know that I am 1,000% supporting you to do that job.
And so can I just pause here, because I think that there's a bit of reputation that I have heard from Latinas about having a Latina boss. Mm-hmm. That is not necessarily, that is probably not a good combo, at least traditionally, because we have had the scarcity mentality. And so we want to be the only Latinas in the room. We feel that we're scared, so we don't support each other, and we don't support particularly another Latina. And I would like to
dismantle women, not
women
only
in
Latina.
general. Yeah, women in general. But a lot of Latinas have told me that is an issue, or that was an issue. I haven't heard that in a long time. And the community has changed so much in the last 5 years. We're by far more proud, far more unified. We understand our power, so we're by far more awake and ready. So maybe things have changed. But how to become a great boss, Latina boss for Latina talent?
Well, listen, I need to do a better job at it, clearly. I wish I had more senior Latina talent in my organization. I spend a lot of time sponsoring kids. Obviously, the reason I got involved with HSF is I have a tremendous passion for having the right pipeline of incredible talent coming into, and by the way, we have incredible talent coming into these industries. Yeah. These kids are so damn impressive. I remember we used to sit on board meetings in COVID where you would do them from your house. And so there was a tremendous benefit to that, because you could actually spend more time through all of the different industry workshops that they would do. And I remember I told my daughter, I need you to sit here and I need you to hear what is going on, because these kids have unbelievable talent. Unlike her, don't have the privilege of, the financial resources to be able to, and yet the drive, the passion, the smarts, the commitment,
resilience there.
Yes, the grit that these kids have, and the empathy and the optimism, which is unbelievable given their background. is so inspiring. And so to me, that's where I spend a lot of time, is really like the kids that come out of that who are part of our organization, because I think there's a lack of talent, candidly. Like none of my senior leaders are Latino, none of them. Not because I don't want them to be, but just because there hasn't been that pool of talent. And yet there is a tremendous amount of Latino talent in the organization, and I spend a lot of time mentoring them. And I had a girl, a Latina, who was on my team who actually wanted to pivot and go to HR. We sponsored her. We actually paid for her role to spend time in a different organization, and eventually she showed her value, merit, whatever, and they created a position for her. But that's important, right? When you can do those things to really elevate Latino talent, both men and women, by the way, because I don't see it in either men or women pervasively, especially in the marketing industry. I wish there was more talent, but there's a tremendous pipeline of talent coming through right now that you can see, and the inspiration around that. And also that marketing is a great career, because I think a lot of them, because they come from these backgrounds and they support their family and they're going to get out of college and they have to pay back loans and help, their families, don't think of marketing as a career where you can actually be successful and prosperous and make a lot of money like you do in finance or whatever. And yet again, is that because it's a passion, or is that because financially that's the decision they're making to take that career? And so I'm here to tell you, like, when you find something that you love, you will be successful and be successful financially and everything else because you love it. And so I think that's really, really important, because that gets lost in the opportunities that they can choose to have.
One of the reasons why we wanted to create this forum with this specific playbook in mind is that there is that the pyramid or the pipeline looks like there's a lot of Latinas at the bottom, and then there's really very few that get promoted to that first managerial role.
Yeah.
And in part, we hear that it is because they don't go for it. Sometimes Latinas are closing doors that they maybe should be closing 10, 15 years later. What if I become successful and I can't have a family? Or what if this career actually works out, but I can't make enough money? So we think that first managerial role promotion is an important one. But we also heard that you are very passionate about teaching or talking about how people should know their worth and negotiate what they think they deserve.
Yes.
So can you tell our audience, actually women that are in that first, second job that want to get promoted, how to have a conversation, how to get what they think they're worth?
It's funny. We do talk a lot about that, right? Because I think as a Latina, you tend to be very thoughtful. And I will have, I run a sales organization. We would kill to get the right deal done for the company, because that's what our job is, right? And so we're very thoughtful, super prepared. We go in with all of the insights, information, and the right opportunities to get deals done for the company. And yet when you go in to negotiate for yourself, and I was, by the way, probably one of the most egregious violators of that in my role, where I negotiate on behalf of the company every day, of negotiating for yourself. And I think it's culturally, the way we grow up, right? Which is be respectful, don't question.
To shake the box,
Right.
mija, you're lucky to have
Totally.
that.
You're lucky to
said
have
the
the job.
same.
No, they're lucky to have you.
Yes.
I tell my daughter every day that she said something to me the other day about, I'm lucky, whatever. I go, Daddy, they're lucky to have you. You're, contributing to that room. You're giving them all kinds of ideas, and, they're lucky to have you doing it as a volunteer. That's your time. By the way, your time is worth money and value, and we just have to shift that mindset. It's really, really hard. And by the way, but I think that conversation starts with, here's all the things that I'm super excited that we delivered on. Here are the things that I'm excited to deliver on. I'd love your feedback on, do you agree these are valuable and why? How do we do that? And then what does that mean in terms of my opportunity, in terms of where I'm going? Financial conversations are the hardest to have. By the way, they're hard for the boss sitting on the other side 95% of the time, because you don't really control 100% of what's going to be put forth and in terms of pay. But I also want to know that if I'm going to go and fight for you, that you believe that you're going to be able to deliver, that you believe that you're aligned with what the roles and responsibilities are for the organization, and that you want to be here, right? Because there is also this notion, especially in the younger teams coming in right now, that, I'm going to be here until I get to my next thing. And so I want to fight to have the best people on our team, and I fight to have the best people on our team all the time. And I fight for, anyone on my team will tell you, if there's something I do is I make sure that every dollar that we can get for these guys, we do that, right? And so no matter what, when we're, in the end of the year, when we have to figure out the bonuses and commission, things, every credit that we can get, oh no, well, this wasn't the team's fault because, the marketplace changed or what, I fight for that as if it was my paycheck, right? And it's not, but it is my paycheck, right? Because that's my team. And so they need to feel that they contributed. They need to know that they mattered. They need to know how they mattered. And one of the most important ways is that they feel like, hey, the company took care of me. And so it's really important that you have those ongoing conversations all the time with your teams, and that you're having, like, the worst thing that you could do is walk in once a year and say, here's what I did and here's what I deserve. That should be an ongoing conversation so that by the time you walk in with your boss or your leader or your HR partner, you've had an ongoing dialogue that has laid out for many, many months at a time why you deserve, how you should get paid, and what matters to you, right? Because, by the way, compensation for different people means different things, right? We're in the process right now and of looking at compensation. We've lost a lot of people to these tech companies because they pay a lot in stock. So is that something that matters more to the teams? How should we be thinking about compensation? But if you don't raise it, it's going to be, no one's going to raise it with you, right? And so you have to raise it, and it's very uncomfortable, but it's equally uncomfortable for the person on the other side of the table. And if it's not anchored in a one-time-a-year discussion about a transaction, but it's over here's my value, here's how I've contributed, it aligns with the company's goals, then it's a lot easier to have that conversation.
And I think that you can negotiate a la Latina, which is using your superpowers, translated into what you just said. Is like companies want to hear commitment, loyalty. I want to hear that you're here, that I'm going to invest. I want to hear that you care. I want to hear that you will deliver. So all of those things are exactly the list that you gave for Latinos.
Yes.
We're optimistic. We have grit. We have passion that could be flip the script towards commitment and loyalty.
Yes.
Right?
And we are loyal. By the way, that's the other piece is that, Latinos tend to be very loyal. And to
do you know how loyal?
Do you know well, listen, I've been here 27 years. I'm very loyal. But
41 to 45 months longer in our first job than the rest of the population. In your first job.
Is that true? That's a real stat? That's amazing.
That's crazy.
That's amazing. I believe it. I think, having most of my best friends are Latina from all my life. And most of them have been in their roles, in their companies, not in their roles, but in their companies for a long time. Because I think that is what was established, right? Like, if somebody's good to you, you're good to them.
Exactly. So, negotiate a la Latina using your superpowers and what is true to us, but at the same time understand what is the company needing, what do we need to do. I want to go back to you, but before stay in our common lane, which is marketing, advertising, and the industry. I want to see that I think it is such a natural for Latinos, particularly for Latinas, to be in the industry. And yet, I do think that there is a misconception or a non-understanding of how much it can be a career, a really successful career that brings a lot of funding and money. I don't know enough about the scholarships, the internships, the publicity, the campaigns that we're doing to bring more Latinas Latinos and Latinas to the industry. I'd like to see more and more on that and run maybe campaigns the way that I see the tech companies tackling Latinos, saying you want to buy a house for your abuelita, come and be an analyst, and doing a little bit more of that.
I think it's when you see the tech companies doing it, we had a meeting a couple of years ago, and there was a bunch of educators in the room from these schools that are not necessarily, the schools that most companies recruit at, but they're very big with diverse talent, right? You also have to, I say it all the time, Harvard and Stanford and whatever are great, but most Latinos are not in those programs. They're in state schools because that's where they can afford to go. I went to a state school too. And, the notion of where you're recruiting is really important. But when you come out the other side, one of the things that we heard from all the educators in the room is the reason they're going to these tech companies is because they've set up an opportunity when these kids come in that they pay for room and board, or they reimburse some of your schooling after you've been there a certain amount of time. And that's really important for these kids who didn't have a lot of money and have a lot of college loans and want to be able to work in New York City, but can't afford to work in New York City unless there's an opportunity that the company that they're working for is helping fund some of that. And it was really important to say that in the room, because I think companies are like, well, of course, we are Coke, McDonald's, the Walt Disney Company, any major brand. Of course, people want to work here. And yes, I think they want to work here. But when you make it easy for them, like these tech companies do, of like, hey, we're going to reimburse your schooling after you've been here 3 years, and we're going to subsidize your housing, and we're going to do all of these things, that makes a huge difference in terms of where you can potentially make a decision to go. And the optics of, again, like I said, those finance degrees where, the money is so significant. And by the way, they're in an internship, their junior to senior year, and they get an offer. So they know when they graduate, they've got an offer. We haven't gotten that good on the marketing side across companies to say, you finished your junior year, you're coming to do an internship here, and hey, we're going to make an offer so that you have a job starting when you graduate.
Can you tell a message to our younger Latina audience and just say, why do you think they should come to the advertising world? I mean, like, we're creative, social, hard workers, all of that. So what would you say?
I think, listen, you're going to have a great time, a ton of fun. You're going to learn. You're going to be able to work across multiple businesses. Every day, my job is different. Yes, I work for the Walt Disney Company, but I work for the pharmaceutical industry, the automotive industry, the fast food industry, the retail business. Every day it's different. And so I love that I get to learn multiple industries. I get to work with partners who are best in class and world-class marketers on how to make their business better. And I get to work on the most incredible storytelling brands in the world. So creative side, which is always fun, and the business side, so you have to use your business acumen. And the world is transforming into, AI and machine learning and data and technology, which is enabling that. We're at an incredible intersection in our industry right now of all of these advancements that are new and are going to speed and feed that system in a way we've never seen before. And so if you want to come into a dynamic, different business that's fast moving and engaging, this is awesome.
So you're talking about AI and about changes in the industry. And I've been curious. I'm the CMO of a company that targets Hispanics, but we also target everyone in America. And in my marketing career, I've always struggled to spend money on the Hispanic market because you're always thinking, I first have to maximize my budget with everyone else. How do I then carve out a little bit of money for different segments of the population? And now with AI, I think it's a totally different volume, right? Like, because you can personalize, like, it goes from being mass market to segmented marketing to fully personalized marketing. What are you seeing from your CMOs that you work with in terms of targeting Hispanics? How are they using technology, and how are they using creativity to be better at talking to us?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. AI is going to transform it, right? You're going from a world, especially in video, we spend a lot of time talking about this, even internally, which is you're going from a world of one to many, right? When you think of advertising on TV, to a world of one to one. And so one to one means you're going to have the opportunity to change the creative that sits in front of that person. In real time, you're going to be able to understand exactly who sits on the other side of the screen. You're going to be able to do sequential targeting, right? When they show up the first time, here's the message. But when they show up the second time, here's the message, and sequentially target them. That's all enabled by technology and data and AI. And so the restrictions that you had before, because I didn't have enough money. Well, now you're going to have so much system process optimization through AI that you'll be able to have more dynamic right? You'll create 20 different pieces, and depending on who shows up on the other side of the screen, you'll be able to dynamically and in real time have a commercial that comes together and gives that commercial message to the person. So it is going to transform how people think about the audiences they serve, who's spending money, and, oh, by the way, the massive growth of the Hispanic population in the market. You're not going to be able to not think about. Even if it doesn't change what you market, it will change how you market, only because the consumers and the taste and how what will motivate them to click to buy will change. And the notion of everything moving to a much more personalized, in real time, 1 or 2 click environment, which is what's going to happen, is happening as we speak, is going to inform a lot of that. And so that's going to be true for not only Latinos, but for every segment of the population, every region of the country, how you think of different screens, how you think of different screens interacting, right? So you're watching a commercial, but what's the opportunity to click to buy here? And so it is transforming how we think of everything that we're doing from a content and storytelling perspective. And what does that mean in terms of how you talk to a customer, in terms of how do you best partner with them? that's why it's so exciting to
I
be in this
know.
business right now, right? Because everything, the rule book is out the door and everything is changing. And it's just a matter of how quickly can we adopt change and embrace all of the opportunity that all of that is going to create for us.
And are you getting from marketers, from companies, your sponsors, your advertisers, more demands to talk to Latinos, content creation, and more on that? And how is that? And are you satisfied? Like, or would you like more?
Listen, I always want more. Being a Latina, I always want more, of course. But we have, a couple of years ago, we actually started as part of our upfront, making a request to marketers in the room to say, we want to make sure that when you're planning your upfront budgets, there is a specific budget to target multicultural audiences across our portfolio. And every year, and we put out a number, $100 million the first year, and they doubled it. And the next year I said, well, you doubled it, so I'm going to ask you to double it again. And so we get on stage every year and we make this request because we know that marketers are thinking about it. By the way, most of them are thinking about it from the Black consumer experience. But I think what it has evolved now, and so we're going back to a much more, again, because of what's going on in how consumers market and how the ability to target one-to-one, there's a bigger, conversation around women. There's a bigger conversation around Latinos. There's a bigger conversation about LGBTQIA. I mean, I think this weekend, we had the March Madness women's Final Four, and we had the women's package, right? The CBS and Turner had the men's. I would dare say there is nothing more exciting right now going on in sports than the women's March Madness tournament, right? And it's women's. The names in the women's tournament are much more household names than even in the men's tournament. And that was a deliberate investment that we as a company started to make 20 years ago when we partnered with the NBA to launch the WNBA. And we have increasingly invested in sports in primetime windows for women to make sure that we had the rights available so that people could watch incredible athletes who are just as good as any of their male counterparts. That's a deliberate, intentional outcome of what the investments we've made over years. And so when brands get behind a marketplace, a Latino marketplace, they will make that much more intentional investment, and it will come through in terms of the opportunities we're able to create. I think we're a long ways to go still, though, in terms of content and storytelling that is Latino anchored, but resonates with broader audiences. I think you've seen that with, Black anchored storytelling in many shows. You haven't seen that massive hit, I would say, yet in the same way from the Latino audience. And I think that's going to be transformational in terms of how people just, it all of a sudden you see that click and all of a sudden everything starts to really move fast. We haven't gotten there yet.
I mean, Disney has created some
Oh, for sure.
productions that have
For sure.
gotten there, but it's not like there's always, we don't have like a playbook already that's proven and it's happening. And
Exactly. And across the marketplace, right? So that you see it in no matter what you tune into, what platform, what channel, what podcast, what anything that it's.
And if you had a
consistent.
magic ball and look at the future, would you say it's going to happen, or do you think it's gradually?
Oh, no.
going to-
You can see that it's starting to happen. You're starting to see now a lot more talent coming through, and you're recognizing the names and you're recognizing who they are. And Eva Longoria is like much more, people buy into Eva Longoria not because she's Latina, but because she's an incredible producer and storyteller. And you're going to have multiples of that coming through now, and you're starting to see more momentum in that space.
And I hope that the disruptor in you, the pioneer in you, can lead the way, because I, like you, believe that there will be a moment. It will be like turning on the lights.
Absolutely.
Where we've been putting if there would be a Christmas tree, we've been putting like lights for a long time, but at some point someone's going to
turn
plug
them
it
on,
in
and it's gonna
boom,
turn
it's
on
gonna
bright.
go.
Yes.
And we're going to see that Latino that wants to see Latino content, that wants to see himself or herself reflected on the screen. So I hope that with your magic and your, again, disruptor, innovative skill set and leadership, we can celebrate that moment.
Rita, I think I know the answer, but I'm going to still ask the question. Did you ever have to dial down being Latina? I feel like you're very authentic.
Yeah.
But did you ever find yourself in situations as you were climbing the ladder or working your way up where you tried to blend in?
No is my answer.
That's what I thought you would say.
Although I will tell you, I had a moment, and Tori knows this, when we were in a podcast. Actually, it was a Zoom. Maybe it wasn't a podcast. It was a Zoom during COVID, where it was me and it was a lady who ran a very important advertising agency. And they asked her the question, and she said, I became the president of this agency. I walked into a room And I looked around, she's like, and I sat down and I said, wow, what did I do to get here? And it was a moment where she's like, she had to think about, did she suppress who she was or how she acted or how authentic she was to be part of that room? And I've never had that. Luckily, thank God, I've never had that. But I think it was because, I was always I loved what I did. I don't, it's hard to describe. I think it's so important to find what you love, because when you find it in a place that embraces who you are, and I was very lucky to work for bosses who were incredible and allowed me to do, and, I remember when we started, she's like, in case you say the wrong thing, I always say the wrong thing. That's part of who I am. But I think I say it with such genuine, sincerity, and that I think people accept. I'm very direct. People know I always have the best intentions. I'm very authentic. I always say the right things in terms of wanting to motivate people. And so it always comes from a place of that. And I think when you do that, you can't really make a mistake. Does it rub people sometimes the wrong way? Like, oh, you're confident. Oh, you're not scared. Oh, I think mostly it's women. Candidly, it's mostly, I've never felt that from a male boss. Early on in my career, I had a woman boss, and I talk a lot about it because she taught me. She was one of the smartest people I've ever met. To this day, one of the smartest people I've ever met. She was young, but she was super smart, super prepared, whatever, but she was vicious. Not only to women, by the way, to everybody, because she was like, I got here and I had to go through whatever, and so I'm not going to make it easy for any of you. And so what I realized from her is, wow, you have to be super prepared, super ready to go whatever, and I never want to be that person. Then I came to work for someone at ESPN who was an incredible boss, could not do the job to save his life, but an incredible human. And so I've been lucky in that I took being prepared from her and being super aggressive and not being ashamed to be aggressive, right? Not being scared to be publicly ambitious, if you will. And from him, that how you make people feel matters more than anything as a boss. And so little by little, you take like the best of the things that you've learned and you bring them into who you become as a leader. I was very lucky that I've been able to create that, tapestry, if you will, of experiences that allowed me to become who I was. But no, I've never dialed it down.
And what about the other way around? Like, maybe you don't have expressed that in this way, but what are the things that come from your Latinidad that become your superpowers, that have helped you and propelled you in your career?
Totally. Well, I think optimism, for sure. I think always looking from a place of opportunity and possibility, and not from what are all the things that could go wrong. I never think of like, when they're like, we have to do this. Okay, well, how are we going to get there? And they're like, oh, it's going to be impossible. No, it's not. You can always get there. It may not be the linear path that everybody thinks you're going to get there, but you can always get there. So optimism is very important. Working harder. There's no question I worked harder than everyone around me, and that always came through. So that was really, really important. But I also think, the fact that, we do everything as a group, right? Like I never did anything by myself. It was always me and my cousins and my siblings and my parents and the grandparents. You even went to have an operation in the hospital, and it was like the entire waiting room was your family, right? And it was like 50 people in there. So embarrassing sometimes, but it was like, I look back now and I'm like, I love it, but it was so embarrassing at the time. Now I'm like, that was so great.
And that translated into your working into your corporations. You're leading like a model.
Because the people around me matter. Well, but it's also that I want the best people around me, and I don't care who wins, because we all win when they win, right? And so that's really, really important. Having the best people around you who are smarter than you and make you better than you, and who can celebrate with you when you win, and who are in it with you when we're not winning, and not blaming, right? But in it with you. Yeah. That's really, really important.
There are cultural nuances that Latinos have. We've been talking about them, but sometimes they're not understood as an asset in corporations. So if you're social there, it's like considered as a negative, as opposed to, oh, wow, no, it's like building teams or being too loud or being this. What do you think are those that you can see with your experience in corporate America that should be flipped, so that Latinas feel like, oh, wow, having an accent doesn't mean that I'm less intelligent. It means that I'm bilingual. So I'm going to take it as a positive. What do you think could be in your mind, one or two things that within corporations could be flipped?
Well, it's funny that you say that, because I was talking to one of the girls that I mentor, a graduate from HSF, who's a Stanford graduate. She's brilliant, so smart. And she, I was called by Fidel, who said, I have this girl, she works there, you should meet with her. And I remember I met with her the first time, and I was so impressed from her story. Her story was basically, her parents came, they were illegal, not educated. She's a twin, she has a brother. She went to high school. They were a disaster. I don't even know if they graduated. She was brilliant. And she had a guy who had received a scholarship before her and said, you should apply to this. You're so smart. You could get these scholarships. And she eventually applied through the process, eventually got in. She got into the University of Chicago for her undergrad, 100% paid. She came with her parents, and she came to show them the letter. They ran a little cantina in a building, a law office firm in the lobby. And so she's like, look, I got this thing. I want to go. And they're like, school? No, you're going to work here. Like, that was their, and the lawyer, one of the lawyers, she calls him the white guy from upstairs, came around the banister and hugged them, and he's like, this is so great for your family. This is going to change their life. Mm-hmm. And they're like, oh, well, if the white guy says it, so it must be. So he's like, I'm going to pay for you guys to go and see the school. And so he paid and he sent them. And eventually she went there, and she told me her story is amazing. Like, I get chills talking about it, because it's like, I remember her story. And she's like, I was miserable there, and I called my mom, and she said, well, you're the one that wanted to go to school. You can come back here and work here. We don't care. Like, they still didn't believe. Uh-huh. And so she's like, I went to a women's financial seminar that weekend, and she met this woman who was very inspirational for her, and has really mentored her. And the woman told her, you got to stay in school, and I'm going to help you, and come get internships in New York. And she did. And she worked in finance in New York and made an incredible career there. And eventually the woman got her to work in a company in Spain. She had applied to business school in Stanford, full scholarship, and she deferred it for a year so she could go work in Spain, but she eventually had to go to Stanford to do the degree. So she did, and she's like, my dream was always to work at Disney. And so she's like, she makes a third of what she used to make in finance working here with a master's degree from Stanford, but this is her passion, and she loves it. And so she and I talk about it all the time. I'm like, you will eventually do what you want to do here because you love it so much. And somebody who's willing to sacrifice, and by the way, her family, who she bought a house for, and they live in the house, and she bought cars for and everything, gives her a hard time because she's making a third of what she used to make. All to say that, and so she came to me last week and she said, I have to talk to you because I just had a conversation with my boss, and he's saying I need to stop being so ambitious and stop being so comfortable with the head of her department, and her are very close. And she now goes a lot, and she travels internationally. And so he's like, you have to stop being so comfortable with people. You have to stop. And I go, are you kidding me? I said, being comfortable with people, that's what you want. Yeah. I said, you want to be able to have, regardless of who walks in the room, have the same conversation, right? Because they're both working hard for this company. They're both dedicated to service in this company. Title does not dictate who you speak toward. Don't speak like that's his insecurity. Don't let that rub off on you, right? And so the notion of like that you're forward, or that you're direct, or that you volunteer ideas, and that you're not able to talk about those ideas in a way that is, leading to a place of bigger opportunity for everyone. But it killed me that she experienced that. And I remember one of my coworkers came in, and I go, can you believe? And he's like, you're getting so angry. And I go, I'm so pissed. I'm so pissed that her boss would tell her that don't be outgoing, because, she's very shy. She'll hold back. And I have always encouraged her, like, you're just so smart. I said, she's like, well, I don't like to tell people that I went to Stanford. I'm like, I'd have it tattooed on my forehead and neon lights blinking, right? Like, I couldn't have gone to Stanford. I wasn't that smart. That is a tremendous asset. And by the way, a tremendous asset that you're Latina, you were able to be there and represent, the incredible community that we are, and that we have the smarts to sit at that table, by the way, with a full scholarship, who had worked in banking. And don't let anyone extinguish that. But that piece of like just being the notion of being ambitious, and ambitious is okay. It's not a bad word, right? And that notion of like, I say it to people all the time. There's nothing wrong with being ambitious, but ambitious for the good of the business, your team, yourself, your success. There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. It's not a bad word. And that narrative, I think, is really, really important.
Love that.
Yeah.
And that was, to me, last week, like very, I thought were so far ahead. And then she experienced this, and I was like, I want to make a phone call. And then she's like, you can't make a phone call. Don't make a phone call. I'm like,
No,
okay.
I love that.
I'm gonna sit on my hands.
I love that corporations need to see that as a positive for
Yes.
companies, and we need to be able to accept our power.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so I'm not going to ask a 30-year-old self, but I am going to ask, who else should we invite? What other Latina do you think we should have in this?
What about NBC, the head of marketing for Telemundo?
Monica Gil.
Monica.
Yeah,
Have you
you're
heard of
right.
Monica?
No, you're right.
Monica's
Monica
amazing.
Gil.
So our head of comms connected with Monica, and we had breakfast in Miami last year at the Grand Prix when I was in town. She's amazing.
Yeah, let's have her.
Amazing.
Rita Ferro, you're a trailblazer, a role model, an example, and an inspiration. Thank you so much for being here with us
Thank you,
today.
guys. It was such a
Thank you,
pleasure.
Rita. And thanks to you, we're going to be able to lead and succeed.
A la Latina.